Thank you. Hello. I'd like to talk to you about digital transformation of a different kind than we normally discuss. The technology world has certainly been full of discussion of digital transformation of the enterprise. But my thesis will be that when the enterprise changes the way it treats individuals, it creates a digital transformation for the individual. The lives of people change when the way enterprises treat them changes. So in getting to that discussion, I'd like to look at what we've actually achieved as identity professionals. Well, really, we've achieved some great things. We've satisfied all of the basic requirements of digital transformation, in which enterprises redefine themselves to deal digitally with us as individuals. We've streamlined and we've professionalized the technology for distinguishing us. If you go back 10 years, that technology was really a catastrophe of amateurism. And we have professionalized the way it is written, the way it is run, and the way it appears. We've transitioned the world from raw authentication, where only based on secrets, to one where, whether it be SAML or OpenID Connect, we're talking about the transmission of claims. I will come back to that in a second, but this is one of the most fundamental changes we have brought about. We've enabled a reliable identity dial tone for the internet and interoperability between diverse systems, all of which was just a pipe dream 15 years ago. And in addition, we can even say we have increased dramatically the security of the internet, in spite of all the work that remains to be done. I remember the day when we sat and talked about the fact that we needed to change our paradigm from attributes to claims. Attributes was the word for characteristics in a closed world of single enterprise. And we realized that when you open the world and go between domains, it isn't simply a question of attributes. It's a question of who says what about whom. Attributes are spoken by an entity, and you must decide, will you actually believe that entity? In other words, that's where we came to the concept of claims, where claims are attributes that are in doubt, and you need technology to decide what you trust for which purposes. This was a fantastic change in technology, without which we couldn't have moved out into an actual internet identity. We would have been stuck within this prison of the individual enterprise. So I don't say all of this to puff us up and make us overly proud of ourselves. I say this to remind us all that we can do really difficult and almost unthinkable things. Claims which, the notion of claims began as something which was almost impossible to explain, and now the entire world bases its technology on the concept of claims, of assertions that are in doubt. So we were able to transform technology on a scale that was unimaginable if you at the time. And the reason I say this is because we must bear in mind that we can do that again. We can do that now. We mustn't look at the current state of technology and say that's what it is. Our role as professionals is to actually go beyond that. So, at the same time that we congratulate ourselves, let's look at how we failed. We've failed to recognize that the digital transformation of enterprise created the digital transformation of individual people. And we left them really in a situation of chaos. You know, the thing about this is we haven't seen the fact that when all of the enterprises digitalize, then the individual faces a new problem of scale. Instead of having to deal with one enterprise or 5 enterprises or 20 enterprises, they have to deal with hundreds and I would say thousands at this point. In addition, it isn't simply a scale in terms of the number, it's the question of intensity. And by intensity, I mean the frequency of dealing with these services and the immersiveness of the relationship with the services. So this is a change which is really significant. And further, despite the hopes of the telcos, who I love, of course, the fact remains that people will require multiple different devices in order, as it become more intensive, and we're using devices in more parts of our lives for more things, we need more kinds of devices, and we need multiple devices. And we all have Alexas now, and we all have tablets, and we have phones. So there's not one single device. And this is and we have devices in our cars, and devices are propagating. And we've left people in a world where all the technology is device-specific, and there is no interoperability between devices, really, because of the control of the operating systems, the device manufacturers. And lastly, well, of course, we have left people with all the problems of privacy and profiling, and we have created a need for technological longevity. And this may be one of the most difficult problems. In other words, you don't just have a device, you have a device that one day a terrible thing happens and you have to move to you have to upgrade to a new device, or you lose your device, or whatever. So there's longevity in terms of as more is concentrated in the device, the need to be able to move the device to other devices becomes greater. And we have no answer for this. And similarly, we have no answers to how people cope with changing service providers. When one service provider begins to disappoint us or fail us or betray us, how do we transfer our digital life to another service provider? And finally, there's the problem of accommodating aging. I speak with experience. what happens when one's memory begins to fade? All of our technology depends on remembering passwords. So basically, you are cut from the digital world just through the process of aging. And at the point of death, the process of inheritance in the digital world of your digital assets is just a chaos. So let me ask, we've been so clever about all the things we've achieved. How could we fail in so many ways? And I would say the reason is because the problems of the personal digital transformation are very gradual. They grow very, very slowly. You don't get all of your thousands of relationships in one day. You don't have the need for multiple devices all of a sudden. Everything is very gradual. It's like the lobster who is put in cold water and the water is heated slowly and the lobster doesn't complain until it's too late. The gradualness has allowed us to escape the recognition that at a certain point, that change in quantity will become a change in quality and becomes something which is really causes deep social resistance. So I have the thesis that PDT's gradual changes are eventually making our systems unusable, and that our organizations do not understand the coming social disjuncture that is implicit in personal digital transformation. I also think that only those of us who have expertise in identity have the ability to perceive the underlying dynamics and to sound the warning bell and to adjust course within our enterprises. Only we can take the leadership, recognizing and addressing the emergent realities. Now, in the physical world, people have been expertly handling human identity for many millennia. But there has been no attempt to replicate those abilities in the digital world. The creators of digital services, we, the enterprises and governments, have scoped our efforts to solving our own problems as enterprises and forgetting about the requirements, really, of the individuals, as long as they could cope incrementally with what we were dishing out to them. So the systems that we've built cause rather than solve the problems of the personal digital transformation, because they have been one-sided, built solely from the point of view of the enterprise. So my thesis is the personal digital transformation requires us to transpose human identity in all of its brilliance and subtlety into the digital world. Now, let's look at the pattern via which digital reality has been created. I propose that what has happened is things begin with a deep understanding of a phenomenon. Then there is innovation in order to bring about what I call transposition. By transposing, it's like in music, where you move from one key to another key. And here, this is moving from one part of reality, physical, to another part of reality, digital. And this pattern leads to a holistic digital equivalent. So if we think about digital audio, scientists had a very good understanding of what audio was. They knew audio was a form of sound waves. And the innovation was to take those waves and sample them to see different amplitudes, and then be able to say, okay, we can express those amplitudes as digital data and produce a holistic equivalent of the sound. The process could be reversed to create the digital audio. And so now the end result is, I just saw 50 million songs for $9.95 a month from Amazon. I mean, this is a fundamental thing that was done through a holistic approach to solving the transposition problem. But if you look at the rest of the internet, this problem of transposition has been solved in a similar way. Let's take the case of just digital banking. It began with people who had a deep understanding of the phenomenon of banking. Then analysts came in and understood the processes and the aspects and the things that had to be replicated. And then innovators built the visual experiences that allowed this to be used by millions and hundreds of millions and billions of people. So what about digital identity? Where are the experts in what human identity has been for these thousands of years? Who are they? What is the invitation? What is the innovation? Where's the transposition? What's the holistic digital equivalent? Basically, I have been looking at this for almost 50 years. It is impossible to find an equivalent in terms of scientists or sociologists or psychiatrists. The only thing that has been studied really is basically identification. In other words, for example, the way that governments have handled identity, during the last hundreds of years. And not only that, when on the internet, when you read about identity, you read all kinds of things when you read about digital identity. And basically, people just make up words and use them in ways that they just pull them out of the sky. So I believe we have to realize there are tools that can help us. One of them is in English. And I'm curious, to know, are there similar tools that can help us in Japanese culture, in Chinese culture, in other cultures? But the European, because you see, the whole notion of identity, it actually comes from French. So it isn't simply English, it's sort of the European experience. Has been studied in really great detail by the Oxford English Dictionary. Now, you may not know that dictionary because you are not that involved in studying the details of English origins, but you actually have not only the definition, but the uses of these words throughout time, since they were first recorded in writing. And so you really can have an understanding. If you look up something like identity, there is great wisdom in what is expressed. I'm going to leave this with my slides, but these notions that are really the essence of the Oxford English Dictionary's definition are hugely accurate and important and worth reading. And I would love you to share other things that from your culture that would lead us to greater insights. But I have actually distilled my reading of the dictionary, into two concepts. One is selfness, and one is who-ness. So selfness is the sameness of the person, the thing, at all times, the condition of being a single thing. The fact that a person is itself and not something else. That's the self and selfness. Who-ness is what is said about people, the characteristics of the person, the ability to recognize the person. And I call this selfness and who-ness, and somebody may think, gee, Kim, you just said you shouldn't make up words. Now you're making up words. But the word selfness originated in 1574. And the word who-ness originated in 1611. People have been thinking about these problems for a really long time. So to make it simpler, selfness is the aggregate of all the attributes and experiences of a person through their life. Who-ness is what you share in individual relationships. And perhaps the most important concept is that this aggregate is never visible in the physical world to the people in your relationships. They never see the whole. Only you, only the self, has the visibility onto all that has happened. But it has that visibility, and that is fundamental to the way it exists. The privacy is the fact that the who-nesses are not convertible into selfness. All right? And that's what creates the distinction. Our own individuality is distinct. So now, I imagine you're asking, okay, but how do these concepts map onto current digital technology? Well, the truth is, digital identification, which is what we have. We don't have digital identity yet. We have digital identification so far, which is the who-ness from the point of view of enterprises and governments. We actually have made some progress in who-ness, and that's what we've achieved, as I discussed at the beginning of this presentation. But there's virtually zilch, zero, in terms of technology for selfness. So to solve the problems of personal digital transformation, we have, in order to do an MVP for digital transformation, we need massive new construction in order to build technology for selfness. And we need major renovation so that who-ness can be made compatible with selfness. Selfness is technology. Basically the self needs its own technology. Just as we've automated the enterprise, we haven't automated the self. And Ian spoke about this in terms of his concepts like active clients and so on. We need to be able to remember and manage our relationships. We need the digital technology to do that for us. We need to have digital technology that handles the problem of recognition without our consciousness, just as happens in this world, in the physical world. We aren't conscious of meeting each other, and this is an identity relationship. It simply is an identity relationship. Our technology must do the same and provide this recognition layer. We must be able to move between devices from any manufacturer and use new devices without perceiving any change. And I will assert that regardless of what the device manufacturers want to do, the need to do these things is so significant that there will be social and governmental intervention in order to make, just as there was around privacy, in order to solve these problems of having a self across multiple devices without being prisoners of powerful corporations, and so on. We need to be able to use these services to fill in its memory, to fill in the self's memory. As people age, the services can guide them and take over the problem, automate the problems of aging, so that they can continue to be part of their digital world. And the digital world, the digital who-ness must evolve in the sense that we have to separate the problem of recognition, of ID, from the problem of characteristics, of claims, so that we don't have to be conscious of all of the ID work and can achieve a world similar to the physical world. Now, to bring this down to something concrete with respect to current technology, in Who-ness, we need to separate the layers, and I was so pleased. I was at the OpenID Japan meeting yesterday, and the leaders of OpenID are perfectly aware of this problem and are working to separate the problem of recognition and distinct impression from the problem of characteristics by splitting up ID technology from the actual claims provider technology. And we have these things, we have many initiatives here: DIDs, OpenID, SIOP, and FIDO2. And in characteristics, we have two phenomena. One is verified credentials, and one is aggregated and distributed claims. Now, the important thing here is that we not unleash 10 different technologies on the people who are already victims of the personal digital transformation. So between us, we as technical people must ensure the convergence of these technologies so that they are interoperable with each other. For example, a key, a recognition that I can have when I'm using OpenID and a recognition I can have when I'm using FIDO. Those should be, once it's established in one, it should be established in the other, and it should automatically be, because it's part of the self, be shared between those different ways of doing who-ness. In terms of selfness, there has been one, I think, important innovation, which is this notion of authenticators. The authenticators, Google has done a very good job, actually, of initiating this notion of authenticator and being able to, I'm finished. Google has done an excellent job here, but this is all very, very primitive, and as Ian pointed out, we need to have much more advanced technology for the self. So I'll just give my conclusions. A bullet train is headed straight for us in the form of personal digital transformation. We need to see it coming and get out of its way by evolving holistic digital identity. OIDC, which you're here to celebrate today, the most promised, I think it's undoubtedly the most promising deployed identification technology, should be triaged, and is being triaged, to determine how it can fit into holistic digital identity. Then self-sovereign identity, OIDC, OpenID Connect, SIOP and FIDO should be rethought so they fit together to solve the problems of the personal digital transformation. Otherwise, they'll just make things worse, wasting everyone's time and money. This requires a great deal of careful thought. I have some examples, but I've gone on too long, so I'll leave the examples for people who would like to look at the slides later. So thank you very much.